Hey everyone, and welcome back to AB Develops, where you can pick up tips and tricks to help you on your path to becoming a web developer. So today we're going to talk about conditionals. Now, conditionals, the best way to understand what a conditional is to think about maybe your morning routine or just kind of what you do throughout the day. We all make decisions, and those decisions will either impact our day for the better or sometimes for the worse. The same thing can be said in a program. So, for instance, when you wake up in the morning, you may decide what clothes you're going to wear. And that is a condition that is set based on how you're feeling that day, or if you've laid your clothes out, or if you're actually even going to drive to work at all, right? So we may be working remotely, and that'll impact what we're going to wear that day. So these are all if statements or conditionals depending upon something else. So we can take that knowledge and kind of bridging the gap between what we know and what we don't know. So using that concept of everyday life, let's think about something that we can do in programs. So taking this example to our program, let's see what we can actually do with conditionals. So how do we create a conditional? First, we start out with the keyword if, then we create parentheses, then we have curly braces. Now, inside our expression here, our parentheses, we can put anything that evaluates to a Boolean value. So a Boolean value is either false or it's true. So we can put anything in here that equals to true or false. Most commonly, we would put something in this expression that evaluates to true, and we would run the first block inside these curly braces, block of code, if it's true. Then we would create an else keyword with another code block or curly braces that would then run something if the condition is false. So let's start out with a pretty simple example. So let's do is 2 greater than 5? Is 2 greater than 5? If it is, we want to console.log 2 is greater than 5. Else 2 is not greater than 5. And of course, we know that 2 is not greater than 5. However, let's run this and see what we get. 2 is not greater than 5. So how is this working? JavaScript is hitting this if keyword, and then it expects this parentheses. It then evaluates every single thing inside this parentheses, and if it is true, then it runs this console log statement, and if it is false, then it runs this console log statement. And this is actually pretty human readable. We would kind of think of this almost we're going about our day. For instance, if we eat breakfast, then we're going to do this. Or if I wake up at 6 a.m., then I'm going to go to the gym. So let's go over some of the different operators that you can use. So there is the greater than, which we've talked about. There's the greater than equal. And what we can do up at the top here, let's actually comment these out here. So we'll say greater than. Then there's the greater than or equal. And then we have less than or equal to. Then we also have equal, and we have not equal. We also have strictly equal. So the difference between the triple equals and the double equals is a matter of type. When you have a double equal, what JavaScript will attempt to do is it will attempt to coerce these to be the same type. For instance, let's see how this works. So if we were to do 2 is equal to 2, we'll say this is equal, and we'll say here this is not equal. Save that. This is equal. So you notice that this to string, we can see that it is not equal to this. However, the double equals takes this string, converts it to a number, and then says, is the number 2 equal to the number 2? Which of course it is. So if we were to add a triple equals and do strict equal, which means we're not only saying we want to compare the value, we also want to compare the type. So let's save that. Then we'll run it, and we'll say this is not equal. So you can run into a bunch of different bugs if you were to use the double equal or loose equal. It does have its place. As long as you know what you're doing, you can use the double equals, but most people prefer to use the strictly equals. So we also have a couple other operators that we can use. So we can use the double ampersand, which is and we have our double pipes, which is or. And we can see how that works in a little bit. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look and see how all this stuff works in practice. Most of these are pretty self-explanatory. The equals, the loosely equal and the strictly equal, are slightly different, as we've just talked about. And the not equal is if we want to compare something that is not true. So we can do that right now. So if we were going to say something like 2 is not equal to 5, we know that that is going to evaluate to true. Now this says this is equal. However, what this is doing is it's just evaluating this expression and running whatever we have in here. So we can put here, this is true, this is false. Now let's run it again, and this will make more sense. 2 is not equal to 5. This is true. 2 is not equal to 5. Now we can also use variables. If you remember in our variables lesson, we talked about different variables that you can reassign. This is really helpful if you want a condition to change depending upon other conditions. So let's give an example. So we'll say is hungry, and we'll make that false. And we'll put is hungry here, and we'll console.log I am hungry. I am not hungry. And let's see what we get. I am not hungry. And that is correct, right? Because is hungry is false. However, what we could do is we could say is hungry is equal to true. And then when we run this, we'll see I am hungry printed out. This is very useful because a lot of times, especially for conditionals, we may want to run our false block or true block depending upon one of our variables being true or false. And we may want to change those variables on the fly in the program so that our conditional will also give us a different output. Now let's take a look at our double ampersand or our and. Now, the way this works is, if you have two expressions or two variables that equal a Boolean, both of the expressions need to be true in order for our true block to run. So for example, let's create another variable, and we'll say is thirsty. And what we'll do is we'll put this as false. So currently this person is not hungry, and they're not thirsty. And what we'll say is hungry and is thirsty. Then what we'll say is I am hungry and I am thirsty. Say I am not hungry or thirsty. So we'll run that and we get this printout. I am not hungry or thirsty. Now, if we were to say true here for thirsty, let's see what happens. I am hungry and I am thirsty. So we notice here that hungry is true and thirsty is true. Remember, because we reassigned hungry to true. Now, if we were to take this away and rerun this, we would get the same printout. I am not hungry or thirsty. Now, in some cases, this is what you want. However, if someone can be hungry and not thirsty, and they can be thirsty and not hungry. So this probably isn't the operator we want for something like this in our program. What we probably want is we want the OR operator, because the AND operator is only going to give this person food and water if they're both hungry and thirsty. So what we'll do is we'll turn this into an OR operator. And now what we can do is we'll say I am hungry and thirsty. And we can put an OR there just to make sure that this is understood. I am hungry or thirsty, right? We don't quite know which one right now, but we know they're either or. So then what we can do is we can make this false, and we can make this true, and we will get the same printout. And we do. And just for good measure, we can make both of these false, and we get this printout here. I am not hungry or thirsty. So just to recap, the double ampersand, or the AND, you have to make sure that both variables, or both expressions, evaluate to true. If they don't, the entire statement is false. For an OR, either OR can evaluate to true, and the entire statement then is true. The last thing that we can talk about is the if-else statement, or the else-if statement. So, for instance, let's say that we wanted to bring this out a little bit further, and we wanted to know if they were either hungry or thirsty. Right now, we don't quite know if they're hungry or thirsty. We just know it's one or the other. So what we can do is we can take this away here, and we can say else if is hungry or is thirsty. There we go. Then we'll say I am thirsty. And then we can say else here. Then we know that I am neither hungry or thirsty. And we'll see that there. So if they're hungry, we're going to print out I am hungry. If they are thirsty, we'll print out I am thirsty. And if neither of those are true, then we will print out I am neither hungry or thirsty. And this gives us a good example of how an else-if block would work. So let's make that true. And we'll run it. And I am thirsty prints out because they are indeed thirsty, right? So what we can then also do is we can say is hungry is equal to true. And watch what happens here. I am hungry prints out. Now you may be asking yourself, wait, I thought is thirsty is true as well. It is. However, for conditionals, conditionals will run the code that is executed first. That means that if hungry is true and thirsty is also true, this I am thirsty block will never run because this code block will always run since this is true. If is hungry is false, then it'll start to evaluate if is thirsty is true as well. So that is something that you have to keep in mind. If you want to check for two things, the best thing to do is to first do is hungry and is thirsty first, and then we can check to see if both of these are done. And I am hungry and thirsty. And then what we can do here is we can say else if thirsty. We'll console log I am thirsty. And then we can say else if is hungry. Then we will say I am hungry. else, we'll console.log, I am not hungry or thirsty. And both of these are evaluating to true, so let's see what we get. I am hungry and thirsty. So now we know if the person is hungry and if they're thirsty. And we also know if they're hungry or thirsty. So, for instance, if this person is thirsty but not hungry, we can say, I am thirsty. And if they are just hungry, we can see that they are just hungry. So this is the basics of how an if-else block would work. Now, there is something called a ternary expression. A ternary expression. And ternaries are a somewhat advanced topic. However, I will go over just a little bit about it. So ternaries are something like this. So if we wanted to write this simple expression of, let's say that we just wanted to see if they're hungry and thirsty and print out something, we could say is hungry and is thirsty. And we put a question mark. We're asking the question, are they hungry and are they thirsty? Then we can console.log, I am both hungry and thirsty. Else, we have a colon here, else, and console.log, I am not hungry or thirsty. And we can put that there just so that we know kind of how this is working. So, if they are hungry, and we have this question mark here, we will console.log, I am both hungry and thirsty, else we have our colon, we'll console log, I am not hungry or thirsty. And the interesting thing about this is we can now assign this to a variable. So we can say let conditional equal this. And then what we can do is we can comment this out here. And we can console.log, and let's see what we get printed out. I am not hungry or thirsty. And you'll notice that you see an undefined here too. So we'll get to that when we go over functions, but basically what this is doing is this is actually turning this into a function because you can return a value from this. So you can return either value. If we wanted to actually return a value, then we can actually get rid of this console log here. And we can get rid of this. And this will only just return a string. And we'll get the exact same thing, and we won't get that undefined. There we go. I'm not hungry or thirsty. And we can start to edit this. Put this as true. And then I am both hungry and thirsty. Now, as you can see, this is not as readable as this here. So if we're going for a human readable code, a ternary expression is not as readable, especially if you start to get into multi-line ternary expressions. They're not as readable. You may see this as you start coding in your jobs. You may see this. This is a ternary expression. I don't particularly like to use a lot of ternary expressions because they can be confusing to read, especially if you start doing more branching logic. You can do if-else ternary expressions and things like that. Those get really confusing really fast if you're not careful. So usually a rule of thumb that I like to go by is if it's a simple condition, if it's a simple if-else, and the variables are really short, and what I'm producing from that conditional is really short, I can use a ternary expression. If I have to branch out a little bit more, then I like to use something that's a little bit more human readable. So these are conditionals and how you would use them. They're of course, are many more things you could do with conditionals, but conditionals really have power when you start to get into loops and you start to bunch all these things together in functions. So over our next two episodes, we're going to be talking about loops and we're going to be talking about functions. So I hope that you stay tuned, and I hope that these videos have been informative for you. Please let me know in the comments if you like these videos and you want me to keep doing more, or you want me to pivot to something else. Maybe there's something that you would like to learn and you want me to do a video on that. So, as always, I have been AB Develops. Please like and subscribe if you like this video, and I will see you in the next one.